My name's Sayeeda, Baroness Warsi, and I'm a member of the House of Lords, but I started my career as a lawyer.
Hi, my name is Nimra. I'm a third-year student at King's College studying PPE. So I'll go through the questions. So the first question is how you start your day. Just in terms of your routine, what kind of steps you take to start your day?
Okay, so I'm quite an early riser, and I usually get up depending on what time of the year it is. I get up and I'll do my prayers, and then I usually start with breakfast, and I will usually have my laptop on whilst I'm having breakfast, which is not a very good sign. And we'll be checking emails, and we'll be checking things like Twitter and anything that may have happened overnight, urgent text messages. I try and switch my phone off from about midnight until about 6 o'clock in the morning. So occasionally I may have had urgent messages or text messages or WhatsApp messages. And then depending on, again, what time of the year it is, because in summer, I'm usually up a little bit earlier, and I might go for a run before I start the day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So the next question is I know you did explain a little bit about your current role, but what it is that you're doing now and how you got there?
So I started my life as a lawyer, as a solicitor. I wanted to be a barrister, but in the end started a training contract with the Crown Prosecution Service and trained with them and the Home Office Immigration Department and private practice for 2 years during the 2-year training contract. And then moved into private practice, predominantly doing criminal defence work. And then a few years after that, set up my own practice with one of the senior partners in the medium-sized practice that I joined after qualifying. And did that until my early 30s, and then became involved in politics, and then eventually served in government and I'm now a member of the House of Lords and continue to be involved in politics, but also involved in academic work, in research. I went on to write a book, lots of work around charities and voluntary organizations. I founded 2 charities, and I remain a trustee of both. And then lots and lots of other kind of campaigns, and so I've had a very, very interesting career, as well as a business career that's running the background of all of that.
That's amazing. Thanks so much. The next question
I can hear a cockerel crowing.
Yeah, sorry, my neighbours have chickens and they're so loud. I tried my best to avoid them.
It's so good. It feels like we're in the village in the Punjab, but I can hear the cockerel crowing in the background.
It really does. I'm so sorry about that, but
it's all right. It's great background noise.
The next question is there anything you would have done differently at the start of your career?
Looking back, I've been incredibly lucky that I've had a great career and a really varied career. But I suppose 2 things I probably would do slightly differently. One, I wish I'd come to the power of understanding the power of networking earlier. And I think it took a long time for me to understand the value of networking and making sure that you remain in contact with people and nurture those relationships, because of how you then come across those people again in life. And I think it's not something that's taught so I come from a very, kind of strong working class background, and I don't think we're taught when we're growing up the value and the power of networking. So I wish I'd learned that earlier. I think I learned it too late. And secondly, I think playing my cards close to my chest, whereas I think in the early days, I was probably quite naive and very open and shared lots of information in my work space, which I don't necessarily think in looking back at it that I should have done, or it necessarily helped.
Okay. Thank you so much. And what would you say gets you back on your feet when you've been knocked down?
probably now the number of times I've been knocked down. And I think every time you are knocked down, you learn that, and if you survive it, and you actually realize that you're much stronger than you think you are. So I think each knockdown makes you stronger, and I've had a lot of knockdowns in life, and therefore I think over time I've built a huge amount of resilience. But I think there's probably two things that throughout my life I've always turned to. One has been faith. And I say faith rather than religion, because I think faith can come in many forms, and this sense of belief that there is something much bigger than you, and that there are values and principles that are bigger than you as an individual. And there are many ways in which people define that faith and that belief. And I think that's always been a guiding light, because there've been moments when things don't make sense, and you just have to accept that not everything can be fully explained at that moment in time. And the second thing is just having very honest friends and family around me. I have great friends who will tell me when I'm wrong, and will always support me when I'm down. And I have a fantastic other half. My husband is just great at standing there in the background, being incredibly supportive. So I think having the right people around you, people you can utterly trust and know that you can be vulnerable and you can be at your worst, and they will support you through it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you. The last question on here is, what advice would you give to someone who's at the start of their legal career?
Two bits of advice. First of all, plan and work incredibly hard in that planning, but be prepared to completely step away from that plan when an opportunity comes your way. So sometimes people just sit back and think things are going to happen to them, and they don't. There has to be a level of planning. But other times people can become so obsessed with the plan that they lose sight of great things that come their way, which were not planned, but actually had a great opportunity, and they've got to seize them. And the second thing that I would say is, don't be afraid of letting go of one aspect of your career and moving on. So one of the things that I've done quite regularly is that I've always decided to, I've always had a time frame for every job that I've gone into. And I've always said, well, this is the date by which I feel I should have left this job. And then I have another date, which is, this is the date by which if I haven't left this job, somebody near or dear to me, usually my husband, will come up to me and say, you really did say you were going to leave at this point, and you should think about why you haven't. So I think having an end point in any new thing, and even if at that end point you're at the top of your game and you think, I'm having an amazing career, think about what difference you're still making, and whether actually you staying is going to continue to make a difference. And then just being brave enough to say there is something else out there. I think we were talking just at the beginning of this interview, before it formally started, to say that I've just made a big decision in terms of leaving a big part of the business world that I'm involved in. And it was something that I'd planned to do in a few years' time, but then I just felt the timing was right now and the opportunity arose. And it's a scary moment, but you've just got to have the confidence that beyond that, there is something else as well. Yeah,
perfect. Thank you so much. I just had another question that I wanted to ask. I've done my research prior about you before with my degree as well, because obviously you were the first female Muslim cabinet minister, and obviously that's so inspiring, because as a Muslim Pakistani myself, we don't see that very much in our community at all. I go to King's, an amazing institution, but again, there's no, I've been there for 4 years. I've never been taught by a Muslim academic. I've never been taught by a person of colour. So yeah, it's so inspiring. But what would you say to somebody like myself who's Muslim and Pakistani? Would you say there's room in the House of Parliament as it stands today for someone like myself to pursue a career in there, and would it be comfortable in doing so?
Absolutely, there's space there for you. Will it be comfortable? I don't think making change is ever comfortable. I think whenever you start to challenge things and change things, and people of colour being in Parliament, women of colour being in Parliament, changes the status quo. But I would say that you've got some amazing women who are there now. You look back 20 years ago, you didn't see any Muslim women in Parliament. I think the first Muslim woman in Parliament was in the House of Lords back in the late 90s, I would say. So, or even beyond that, I think it might have been a little bit later than that. But now we have members of the House of Commons, members of the House of Lords, we have members of the shadow cabinet, we have ministers, junior ministers, senior ministers. I've served in cabinet. I think a lot of those glass ceilings are starting to be broken. But what your generation has got to do, Nimra, is you've got to go to the next stage, and you've got to, it can't just be, you know, a woman, Muslim woman in cabinet, or a Muslim woman who's a minister. There should be lots of you there. It should get to the point where it's no longer a talking point, because it is part of the norm. So absolutely, I think there's space for you, and you should have an ambition to be in Parliament. But I think also you have to go into it with your eyes wide open. It isn't easy. Politics isn't easy, full stop. It certainly isn't easy if you're a woman of colour. I think the political climate that we live in at the moment, some of us felt that these were battles that we would have had in the 70s and 80s, and we would have won them by now. Unfortunately, your generation is winning them, or, you know, fighting them and trying to win them all over again. And until we get to the point when, you know, women like you and I can be as mediocre as white men and still have the same level of success as white men, unfortunately, the battle goes on, and you've got to be part of it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And just, sorry, following on from the point that you said earlier that really stuck out to me, you spoke about how important faith is to you. Have you ever been in a situation where you feel like you've had to not choose but kind of compromise? Because coming from an experience myself, I went to Saudi Arabia back in September for a similar work experience. It was funded by the Prince, and when I went there, obviously I've never been to Saudi Arabia before, and my perceptions of it were completely different to when I went there. But I felt even being there in a predominantly all Muslim country, I was put in a situation where I was uncomfortable, and I had to pick between my faith and my beliefs as a woman and as a Muslim, to kind of coincide with what their perception of me from a Western country was. So yeah, have you ever been in a situation where you feel like you've had to compromise either of the two?
I think for me, faith is a really personal thing, and it kind of roots me, and it guides me, it supports me. I would say it's something that tempers me during times of success, and it supports me during times of distress. So it's a really personal thing for me, and I don't think, look, there's always an element of compromise in everything that you do. You know, there are ways in which you'd behave with your friends, but you wouldn't behave like that in the workplace. You always, you know, there are ways in which you'd behave, say, in court, but you wouldn't behave like that on a night out with your school friends or your university friends. So I think there's always an element of compromise. Compromise isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think that where you feel that you're no longer being true to yourself, and that's making you feel uncomfortable, that you're trying to be, or you're being forced to be something that you are not, then that's the point when you should push back. Because ultimately you have to be true to yourself, because if all your achievements are built upon a set of principles and values and an identity which fundamentally is not you as a person, then who are you? You know, who are you? And at what point do you completely lose the real you? And I think that you know, you've got one go at this, and you're too precious as an individual to live it in a state which is false, and you're not being true to yourself.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And lastly, I just wanted to ask, is there any kind of work experience or anything that you would suggest or could offer, or anything for somebody like me who so I studied PP, as I mentioned. I took law in my first year, so all I know is I want to go into social science and public policy. I'm not quite sure which route I want to take. I've done a long list of work experience in different sectors. Obviously, with the current climate, like internships and stuff that was more suited for me has now been cancelled. But is there anything that you would suggest or could offer?
Definitely. I mean, look, I saw your CV before we did this interview, and you've got an amazing CV, really impressive CV. You've done so much at such a young age, and you're doing exactly the right thing, which is spreading your experience wide. So it's almost making sure that you've seen a little bit of everything to allow you to make your mind up about what you want to do. And the broader you keep that experience and the broader you keep that CV, I think the better it is for you at this stage. But definitely once this COVID period is over, there are opportunities in Parliament for internships, for work experience, for paid roles as well. And what I will do is I will get Sarah to make sure that you have my email, and then you can send an email to me direct, and we'll see what we can sort out.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's been lovely talking to you.
Bye-bye.